Welcome, everybody, to the Bassfug Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, neighbors next door, all the way, $130 Greyhound ticket from Montreal to Toronto, Nightflyer. Thank you for joining us on the show today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. There's a couple of questions that I have. I think one of the main ones is a sound design question. I notice that there's an aesthetic to synthwave. I think that you would say that you were a synthwave artist, chill wave artist. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm curious, how important is it to maintain the aesthetic? Because I don't really see someone who's labeled as synthwave unless, sure, they might have a sound that sounds like it, but unless they have the album cover or the neon pink palm trees, it's not considered synthwaves. I'm wondering if aesthetic is a mechanism to just sort of keep the genre in line, or am I seeing this totally incorrectly?
That's an interesting question. I think it's definitely partly sound design, and you can see that kind of creeping into today's pop music with artists using so-called like retro synth sounds in their songs. So that is part of it, but yeah, if without a certain aesthetic quality, I think it would be easy just to call what would be a synthwave act just like another indie pop group or something. You can almost see that with the Midnight and on the recent albums. I love the Midnight, by the way, but I think that without the aesthetic quality of synthwave, so yes, the album covers, there's certain kinds of atmosphere. You'll see a lot of releases influenced by classic movies like Blade Runner or other 80s classics.
Yeah.
So I think it's more of an overt. It's more overt, I would say. So like they're more intentionally trying to create this specific aesthetic.
Because I'm curious, I'll listen to John Carpenter or I'll listen to the Dawn of the Dead soundtrack, and maybe not so much Dawn of the Dead, the original one, but, Escape from New York. Is that considered synthwave, or what is that considered? Because that didn't really exist in the 80s, that term. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would say like synthwave really relies on the 80s for inspiration, but good synthwave builds on it and draws from a myriad of influences from today's music. So you have groups like Dance with the Dead. They have a lot of heavy metal and even like four on the floor beats, and then you have like Mega Drive, who is sometimes going to industrial territory. But I would say synthwave draws inspiration from the 80s, but really builds on it, so it's its own thing. So in the early years, you could see, yes, people were definitely inspired by John Carpenter and Blade Runner, because those are kind of the stereotypes. Mm-hmm. But the genre has evolved quite a bit since then, since like the early 2010s, I would say.
It seems like to me, and I don't know, I'm just a pedestrian, but it seems like vaporwave sort of set up synthwave. Is that a correct assessment?
To be fair, I'm not that much into vaporwave. My impression is more that it's more focused on the 90s and a little more, I would say, sample-based and like more dripping with atmosphere, like very like slow grooves, lots of reverb. Whereas synthwave is more focused on, I would say, probably melody. And with certain artists in the genre, like certain kinds of drums, like you have gated reverb, which is definitely present in vaporwave, and there's definitely crossover. And same with like chillwave styles, like more slower, like hotel pools and home, that sort of thing. So I would say they're kind of related, but they're each their own distinct genre.
It's interesting you bring up gated reverb. One of the questions I have is I just want to get a complete tutorial on the vintage sound design that goes into this, because I think you're maybe the second artist that I could really call synthwave, but you really own it. And the listeners already know how to make a neurofunk dubstep growl at this point, and it has to do with Serum. But I'm curious if we could just walk through the vintage sound for a couple minutes and see what it takes. Because when I first heard this sound, it was the Portlandia theme, and I don't think that's really synthwave, but that sort of washed out sort of. It wasn't even really Boards of Canada. It was similar, but I wouldn't say it sounds like Boards of Canada. They're their own thing. It's hard to say because when I go and listen to it, it sounds nostalgic, but I've never heard a band from any era previous that sounds like it. So it's like, why is my brain perceiving it like this? Can you talk about your sound design and your production? What DAWs are you using? What VSTs are you using? And how do you get the sound?
Yeah, I'd love to. So way back when in 2015, I started with GarageBand, and that was actually a great primer on how to make music in a DAW. But like a year later, I went to Logic Pro. It was a natural evolution. I love Logic. I've been using it now for probably like 4 or 5 years almost, and it's really good. Has great stock instruments, great stock effects, and it's I just know it like the back of my hand at this point. Well, in terms of gated reverb, usually you want to start with like a good 80s sounding snare sample, maybe from like a Lindrum pack or something like that. You could insert the reverb directly onto the snare track or use it as a send on auxiliary. And then usually you would put like either like a compressor after to kind of thicken it up, and then to get that gated sound. So for anyone who doesn't know, a gated reverb sound is when like the snare plays and you can hear the reverb, like the room sound, and then it just kind of cuts off abruptly. A very classic 80s sound. So you'd put a noise gate after the reverb or after the compressor, whatever you have on the chain, and then just set the threshold until it kind of cuts off artificially. You can also bounce your snare in place and chop it up and get the sound that way. There's a lot of ways.
Yeah. Are you using hardware? Are you passing this through cassette tapes or anything like that, any outboard gear, or is that not needed in the digital realm?
Yeah, I'm 100% in the box. I do actually have an old Sonic synth that's here, but I have not used it.
Really?
I use
which model number is it?
Hang on, I'm gonna have to go look.
Yeah, sure. This is important, folks.
It's the ESQ1 digital wave synthesizer.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I got it for free actually, so that's why I haven't.
Why not? Is it sentimental? Is that why you haven't put it on reverb.com or?
Yeah. Well, I actually want to like just use it in my own productions. I just haven't really had the chance. Yeah. Every time I'm like, okay, I'm going to use it, I just have a different idea and go off, making my own music. I'm like, okay.
So you're working in the box. What else are you using? We got the gated reverb, but are you using? I'm sure you're probably using maybe like a Juno type synth or something like that. Are you using? Who is the best company for simulating the vintage synths? Is it Arturia? Is it Roland's new Cloud? What are you using?
I really like Yuhi. I use Diva all the time. It's pretty much my go-to synth. It is very CPU hungry, as Yuhi does mention on their website. But I've been using it for probably about 4 years. I also really like the Tal Uno LX. That's Tal Software's emulation of the Juno, so you're correct. I have Korg's Legacy Collection, so that has like the Poly 6, the M1,
yeah,
the Mono Poly or Monopoly. I'm not sure how you say it.
yeah.
I'm going to say Monopoly. And I really like Logic's Retro Synth, actually, which kind of has different emulations or approximations. So you kind of have a retro analog style emulating a Moog. And then you have FM that's kind of going for a DX7 vibe. And then you have, I think, a Waldorf wavetable emulation as well. It's really light on CPU, and it's really easy to make sounds with that. But yeah, Diva is definitely my go-to.
Huh. Interesting. I'm not sure what the synths of choice are in this genre, and I just sort of assume that it would be as close to the manufacturer as possible. But I don't think Diva is really modeling anything from the 80s. It sounds like it, but it's, I don't think it's like trying to be a Korg M1 or something like that. So it's interesting that you bring that up. I guess you are using the Korg Legacy series. So the famous M1, I had an M1, and every preset on that just sounds like a television show from the 90s. It's like, oh, here's the X-Files. Oh, here's Family Matters. It's crazy.
Yeah. I find I have to be careful with that one sometimes, because otherwise it's really on the nose, and I just don't want to necessarily be broadcasting that. I'm just like, using okay, guys, here's the M1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you find that's like sort of a challenge, having to, I guess, stay within, I guess, the rigid confines of synthwave sound, but at the same time not being too gimmicky?
That's a good question, because I'm actually, the last couple of years, I've been evolving my sound little by little. I'm not super prolific, but I do evolve. For instance, in early last year, I released a track called Night Watcher that is really influenced by like a lo-fi house sound, but it also kind of retained a bit of, it was really synth heavy, so I still got to flex those synth muscles. And then I released a sequel to that last month, and that really continued on with the house vibe, but also brought in the chill wave aesthetic. So I consciously tried to come up with just a melody and chord progression that just really felt nostalgic to me. So I'm kind of building on my synthwave roots, but there is definitely room to grow, and you can see that with other artists too. They're just kind of bringing in other influences, like the Midnight's new album. Like I mentioned, it brings a lot more pop, and even like indie pop, and even you could say like some influences of trap. And then other artists are going the opposite direction, bringing in like metal and funk and stuff like that.
You're talking about influences, and you said something that kind of stands out for me. You say it feels nostalgic to me. Kind of going back to the original remark I made earlier. What is you're feeling nostalgic, but what is the nostalgia for? What, you know what I mean? Like what band is it that you're nostalgic for? Because I wanna find this band, because it feels like they don't exist. I know there's John Carpenter and stuff, but I feel like why is my brain being tricked into thinking this existed when it never did? You know what I mean? And it's weird, because I'll go into, let's say, a clothing store. I hate to say this, but I'll go into H&M, and I'll see they have this weird like 90s collection, and I see all this stuff and it looks like it's from the 90s, but I was there in the 90s as a teenager, and none of it was actually there in the 90s. Like I see a Fly Girl jacket, like a Fly Girl from like In Living Color, but it has like the Super Mario World logo or Nirvana logo on it. And I'm like, these are two things that are clashing. I'm wondering, the sound of synthwave, is that the same thing? Is it just like all of the cues from the decade sort of put together in something that's palatable for 2021?
Yeah, you could probably say that. It's I would probably liken it more to Boards of Canada. It's creating a feeling that you don't really know like what it is or why you feel it, but for some reason it makes you feel like wistful or longing of some sort. But it doesn't necessarily exist in like reality. Like you're like wistful for what? What are you longing for?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're nostalgic for something that didn't really exist. So I find that pretty intriguing.
It's like Ghost in the Shell.
I draw on that myself.
I don't know. It's like Ghost in the Shell, that anime where it's like the false implants. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's very bizarre to me. I'm sorry if I'm making it weirder than it should be, but it's a phenomenon that I think about when I'm listening to this genre. Who are the people that you sort of mentored you, that you were inspired by to make this? Since we've sort of established this didn't really exist prior to the existence of the genre, so I'm curious. Was it just Boards of Canada? Who was it, and why did you get into the genre?
Well, I think in general, my influences really stem from. I remember I listened to the Trainspotting soundtrack a long time ago,
wow.
and Brian Eno's song.
Yeah, that's a great soundtrack.
Yeah, it's so good, and the movie's great too.
Yeah.
Brian Eno's song "Deep Blue Day" on it really kind of opened my eyes to like ambient music, and it's something I didn't know existed before. And then I got into Boards of Canada and Tycho probably a few years later. And then a couple years after that, I got into, the first song I listened to properly, because I watched Drive in 2011 when it came out. I really liked the soundtrack. It's kind of a stereotypical, this got me into Synthwave movie.
Okay.
But it really did. It's a soundtrack that features like, modern day artists that are really going for an 80s sound. So in 2015, I just listened to a song by Perturbator, Welcome to Nocturne City. And it really just hit home. I was like, wow, I want to make this kind of music. And I had no plan. I had no other real synthwave influences. I didn't even know it was a genre at that point. And then probably a month later, I kind of got into Time Cop 1983 and Miami Nights 1984 and Mega Drive and Lost Years. And then I kind of just kept trying to emulate this kind of sound and sucked really bad. But then I just kept working at it and kind of developed my own sound and got into the Midnight and FM84, and Michael Oakley is also a great like synth pop style artist. And then I would say for the chillwave side, again, it's a very stereotypical path, I guess. The artist Home had a song called Resonance. That's probably like the most famous chillwave song ever, and it's even a meme in some respects. But yes, it did get me into the slower chillwave, synth heavy, slow music that really kind of intentionally ups the nostalgia factor. That by really going for like your emotions rather than longing for like the 80s itself.
Yeah. Wasn't a great decade, folks. Don't fool yourself.
Yeah. Economic destruction, different wars in Latin America. It's not great.
You didn't even have Mario 3 yet. Like,
yeah, I mean, that's the worst thing. Come on.
Yeah. So you mentioned these influences, and I'm curious, were there any local acts that you were able to meet up with pre-COVID? Because I know this project started around 2017. Were you involved with any sort of Toronto synthwave scene, or were there people that you were able to collaborate? Were you even playing shows?
I wasn't playing shows. I still have not. I'm just not good enough yet, and I'm just more focused on just making music.
What do you mean you're not
really
good enough?
Slow.
What do you mean you're not good enough?
Oh no, I just feel like playing live or anything. Like I have not practiced at all.
Okay. Yeah, because your tracks are great. That's why we invited you on the show. So,
yeah. I'll take it. It's more just the actual playing live aspect.
Okay, cool. There's some people here in Montreal that maybe I could after the show or whatever I could get you guys to link up if this COVID thing ever goes away, which I don't know if it is. Some days it looks like it is, some days it doesn't. Maybe you play a show in Montreal.
Oh, well, that'd be cool. Oh man,
yeah,
that'd be scary. But I'd probably go for a beer with them first.
Okay,
and then,
excellent. So there is. Did you see that there was any scenes, synthwave scene in Toronto at all, or because I'm not sure. I know about here, but I'm not sure there.
Yeah, there's definitely a big synthwave scene. I haven't actually met up with a lot of people, but I saw Michael Oakley and FM84 in Toronto, and I met up with Neon Fox, who's a really, really, really good promoter of synthwave. He's based in Toronto. Then there's a bunch of other artists, and I think people who have a podcast, and their names escape me at the moment, so I do apologize. But yes, there is a thriving scene in Toronto. I think Zayas is also based in Toronto, if I recall. He's another artist who's really good. So Toronto is great. I mean, I would be shocked if it didn't have a synthwave scene, honestly.
You touched on something about your output. You feel that you aren't putting out a lot. Is that what I'm getting? Because I noticed in your discography when we were going back and doing more research, 2018 and 2019, it doesn't seem like you're as active as you are, say, in 2020. But in 2020, I think it was mostly singles, and in 2019, I think it was just one EP. Do you want to talk about that? Is that something is it that you're too much of a perfectionist, or just life happens?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. I think it's almost just a function of me getting better and improving, like literally practicing on writing songs and knowing what my taste is, and knowing what I think will make a good song. So the more I did it, the better I got. And going into 2020, obviously no one knew exactly what it would be like.
Yeah.
But when the lockdown first hit, I did have a lot of free time that I used to just work on songs. I have a lot of scrap projects that, while I don't release them, they really did kind of provide me with a solid foundation for both building my confidence and, like I said, developing my taste and my songwriting skills. So yeah, I am more into releasing singles now because I feel like I just like the consistency of being able to release something more frequently, rather than waiting, half a year for a 5-song EP or something.
And to be honest, from people that I'm talking to on the show, I don't know, maybe I don't want to speak for anybody, but I think we're back to where music began, where everything's just sort of the single now. I'm not sure if albums really stick as much as they used to. I think it's a good strategy to do the singles once a month or so, from the people that I speak to who seem to be pretty successful.
For sure, yeah.
I have I have a fun question here. How important is the arpeggiator in synthwave?
I would say it's pretty important. If you have like a good chord progression going, let's say you have like a good lead line over top of it, and you're like, okay, this needs something more. Of course, the ARP is like just a very standard go-to to adding some more movement or a different melodic twist. And I would say I use it a lot in my own work. Obviously, it doesn't have to be like a built-in ARP on a synth, but even just like writing an ARP melody, I love it. I don't know. It's just, there's something about it. It's magical when it's sidechained to the kick drum and starts going and your head starts bobbing.
Yeah. Are you using any special like VSTs for that? Because I know there are a couple. Who's the guy from Toronto, Deadmau5's friend, Xfer? I think he has like an arpeggiator VST that he made. Maybe I'm confusing it. And there's a few others. Are you just? I guess you said you use the piano roll. I'm presuming. Is there anything else, like any other synth that has like a cool arpeggiator? I know that sounds like a stupid question, but I went to a place to get my one of my synths fixed. And the guy was super impressed with the Access Virus C. And I was like, why? And he's like, oh, the arpeggiator patterns on the Access Virus C are so good, so good. And I was like, okay. And then I picked up an SQ1, which is like a chord kind of sequencer. It's not an arpeggiator, but it kind of is. And when I got it, I had the worst buyer's remorse ever. I was like, I just spent $200 on this shitty like thing, but it's my favorite thing I own now. If I had to sell all my synths, I would keep that and plug that directly into the PC to control the VSTs. That's how much I love this thing. It's just like you turn a couple of knobs and you have your melody. So that's why I'm wondering about the arpeggiator. That's why I asked that, but it's fine if you don't have any special connection to it or anything.
No, that's a good question, I think. I think the one you're thinking of from Xfer is Cthulhu, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's the one.
I've not used it, but I think it also has some kind of chord making capability.
Yeah.
But yeah, Diva has a built-in arpeggiator, which I do like using, and Logic has its own MIDI effects plugin. So it's like an ARP. Sorry?
No, I was just agreeing, sorry.
Okay. It's like it's an ARP plus it kind of has a sequencer, so you can draw in like your own shapes based on velocity, and also have it just play the chords if you want instead of like an actual ARP line. That's the one I use the most, I think.
Quick question: Why Logic over Ableton? Why haven't you made the jump to Ableton? Do you feel any need to, and that's not shaming. I don't use Ableton personally, but every single person I interview on this podcast, they jump to Ableton, and I'm at the point now where I'm thinking, okay, maybe I should start using Ableton myself. I'm curious if you feel that pressure or if you're just fine with Logic.
I don't feel any pressure. Logic was the natural choice for me because I started with GarageBand, and the GarageBand is basically Logic Lite at this point. It's very similar look and feel. Logic is just really more advanced, so I could use the training wheels well, and then graduate into Logic to mix a couple metaphors. But for Ableton, it's very popular. A lot of music tutorials I watch use it, so I feel like I almost know how to use it at this point, even though I've never actually used it. It's just I just know Logic too well, so it's not worth it for me. It would just be too much of a hassle to switch and learn a new workflow, I think. And plus, it's so expensive. It's like if I wanted like the full thing, it's like $1,000, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, Max for Live does seem really cool though. I love those.
Max VST. Or not Max VST. What the hell is that called? The Autechre thing. I can't believe I forgot the name of it. Anyways, let's talk about your COVID experience. You said briefly that it gave you some more time to work on some music. Has it like impacted you in other ways, or maybe you could touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So I work in a public library full time. So when the lockdown started, everyone just kind of started working from home. So I didn't have a commute anymore, which was awesome. So that really freed up a lot of my time. And then as going into July, as the numbers went down, we started reopening. So I went back to work full time, and I'm still at work full time. So it is strange. We've gone through a couple more closures. So we're closed to the public currently. So it's just staff.
Yeah. Pickup only.
And my girlfriend has been working from home the whole time since March and might continue going into next year. So it's been very strange for the both of us. But I mean, I've been very lucky. No one I know has gotten COVID. I have not gotten COVID. Well, actually, one person I know has gotten COVID, but she recovered. She definitely recovered.
Yeah.
But myself, I've been very lucky. I haven't been impacted financially or health-wise like a lot of people have, and I really do I think the government could have done a better job at maybe preventing the second wave, but
I don't want to sound totalitarian or anything, but we should have had the Singapore canes in January, and if you were outside, they just whoop the shit out of you to go back inside. And if you could withstand the cane, then you could get that carton of milk or whatever. But because in Montreal, no one gave a fuck. There's no social distancing whatsoever, and everyone's like, "Why is there so many cases?" And it's like, yeah, I wonder why.
Yeah,
but
you guys still have the curfew?
We have curfew, and we just opened up on the 8th.
Wow.
So that was yesterday, I guess. And so, the library actually just opened. It's only pickup right now. But before for a month and a half, 2 months, I couldn't even buy an alarm clock because it wasn't considered essential.
Wow.
It was not the podcast to be complaining about it, but I have my but it's for the good, but it's like you said,
you don't need to wake up on time. It's okay.
No. It's like you said, like I'm not anti-mask or anything like that. I'm definitely pissed off that the government didn't really. It just turned in the same bureaucratic bullshit as everything else always does. If there's a comet that's going to hit Earth, we're only going to find a solution after it hits us. Like if we rely on, right? I don't know if you mind, but do you mind if we talk about the library a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, I believe it or not, I really like going to the library, even though I have a huge book collection here.
Awesome.
There's tons of ebooks online and stuff like that. But I think there's a couple of things that I think people don't know about the library, and I'm not sure if it's the same in Toronto, but I'm going to take a wild guess. I know at the Montreal library, they rent out PlayStation 4 games, so they probably are going to rent out PlayStation 5 games now. Can you rent PlayStation 4 games at the Toronto library?
Yeah, I don't actually work at the Toronto Public Library. I work at a library just north of Toronto.
Okay.
But yes, for Toronto, I would not be surprised if you could rent video games. And at my library, we just started a couple of months ago, even though we're pretty behind because another municipality near us has been doing it for about 10 years, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, we have PS4, we have Switch, we have Xbox One. I think we're getting PS5.
That is insane.
Eventually.
That is insane. You could go rent Animal Crossing.
Yeah, you can get like the newest game for free and just see if it's good. And
and there's comics, there's comic books, and there's all like manga, and there's DVDs. It's crazy. Like I don't think people realize that. I think people's connection to the library is doing detention in junior high, and I don't think they realize. And there's tons of people there too. Like it's I don't know. I'm pro library. I'm very pro library.
Thank you. It's really a shame that people's experience have been like tainted, but I think the lockdown and COVID in general has really hit libraries hard, but we've also kind of beefed up our online experiences quite a bit.
Yeah.
We have more numbers online than ever, of course. So like you said, we have ebooks, audiobooks, movies, TV shows. I know in Toronto you can get like a Canopy membership just for free. So you get like all these documentaries and like foreign films and different movies just with the library card. It's pretty awesome.
Why do you think it is that people don't really I guess go to the library pre-COVID? Because I would on Sundays, I don't know, I'm a workhorse. I have a million projects. I have this podcast, another podcast, a bajillion things, and I bring my stuff to the library. I sit down and I'll work there on Sundays, usually for about 4 or 5 hours, and it's just a beautiful experience. And you're surrounded by just decades, not even more than decades, like hundreds of years of just knowledge. and it's just mind-boggling. I know there's the internet, but there's just something about sitting down and just go to the library and draw. There's just so much. Do you find that there's maybe like a public relations problem, or maybe people see the library as like kind of like a place where only crazy people go there and sleep and stuff like that, or jerk off on the public internet? What do you think is the problem?
Oh, those stories hit too close to home. Well, that really is the eternal question for libraries, and it's just been nagging us for decades, really. I can say for sure. I think it is definitely partly a PR problem. So people just don't really know what the library has to offer. And then I guess even if they did know, sometimes they just don't want to go anyway, or they think, the internet will have it if they're looking for information. So yeah, I'm enrolled in a leadership program right now and we're really trying to get to the heart of what draws people into the library. Why is it important to them? And how can we appeal to specific people who, maybe they went to the library before COVID, or even in high school, but they haven't been since. So not even to pick up a book through curbside pickup. So why? That's really, like I said, that's the eternal question, but we're working on it.
Can you talk? Is this like a Black Ops project? Are you allowed to talk about that program a little bit, or because I'm curious? Because for me, we could complain about the culture all we want, but I think if you want to see change in the world, you have to become the change in that world. And in order to do that, you need to have mentors. You need to have people to raise you. And a lot of people aren't fortunate to have 5-star people in their lives to bring them up. Everybody's just trying to get by. But if, let's say you want to learn about Bitcoin, or you want to learn about investing or something like that, if you go on Google and you type in investment advice, you're going to get some shitty blog written by some freelancer guy on a WordPress site with 1 million ads. If you go to the library and pick up Bitcoin for Dummies, or the history, I'm reading this book right now. What's it called? Ascent of Money, by I forget the author, but man, it just tells you everything. It just tells you everything, and it's so much easier to get a book that is condensed knowledge than it is to plow through a playlist of really crappy conspiracy theory YouTube videos, right? Or half-ass produced stuff. I really, really wish there would be more people on board with this autodidactic sort of lifestyle. And I'm not a bright guy either, So I'm just curious what you guys are trying to. What are your plans on getting people to be interested in this and the culture, right?
The leadership program itself, it's the D leadership program. It's run by Stanford University, and they just paired us up with a couple, I guess, mentors, and then we also work with other companies who are doing the same program. So yesterday we did a big Zoom get together with, I think Google had a presentation. Autodesk was there as well, the city of El Paso. So just a bunch of different teams were just sharing what they were working on. So for us, we're interviewing our users and really trying to pinpoint one thing that we can do to really improve the experience of our customers and users. It really involves a lot of brainstorming and more brainstorming on those brainstorms. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to be prototyping ideas and then roll something out hopefully in March. And so right now we're still kind of honing in on what we want to focus on, which it's difficult. Because there's just so many different things we could do and so many great ideas we have. I actually can't give you a solid answer to that question just yet.
I understand. I'm going to say something, and I hope this doesn't sound crass. But if you go to the library, there's a lot of people there. You can meet your next love of your life at the library in the graphic novel section. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. You could just go there and meet like-minded people, cool, creative people. It's not just before. If you go to the bar, that was it. People think, oh, you just go get drunk and then you're going to meet people. But you can meet other like-minded people at this place. It's a shame. It's a shame that not as many people are taking advantage of it and choosing to go on Amazon, buying some crap for $20 that they could just borrow for free. That's being paid with your tax dollars,
Exactly. Yeah. One of the people we interviewed too, he really saw his library as being the community hub, which is what libraries are nowadays, or that's what they're considered. But since COVID hit and he tried using the library online, he didn't have that same kind of a community experience.
Yeah.
So one of the things we're trying to figure out is how to kind of translate that feeling of community and belonging and exploration into the online experience.
Excellent. I'll shift gears back to the music. Sorry about that. I just wanted to. This is a very cultural specific podcast, and if you want to talk about creation of culture, it is at the freaking libraries, every single one of them since the dawn of time. Okay, and people don't realize.
I love libraries, so
yeah,
you'll have to stop me from talking too much.
Same. Let's go back. You were talking about communities. Let's sort of switch back to synthwave. Are there synthwave communities like Discord channels that you're active in, or how, if someone wants to start producing synthwave, how do they start and how do they get involved with the synthwave community?
Yeah, I know there are Discords, but I am mostly active on Twitter. There's a great community, different little subgroups and subsets of artists who are extremely supportive. I would say if you want to get into synthwave, I would say try not to worry about finding your own sound immediately. I would probably pick a YouTube tutorial or something and try to maybe work on that, or just get inspired by something, maybe from a movie, and like just don't think too hard about it at first, because you're not going to know what you're doing. I got started in synthwave by watching Arcade High, who is a synthwave duo. They one of their members put out synthwave tutorials back in 2015, and I watched that. And when I used GarageBand, I was like, "Wow, I'm making synthwave," and it was pretty cool. So yeah, don't think too hard about it. Just start making music, I would say.
So you're saying just stick to Twitter if you want to find like-minded people to help you with that?
Pardon me, sorry?
So stick to Twitter if you're trying to find other people to, I guess, be a part of the community with.
Well, actually, yeah, I'm sure there are good Discords as well, but there is a good subreddit called our Synthwave Producers on Reddit, and that I used that as well when I was first starting out. There's like a weekly feedback thread. You can just post your song, get people to listen to it, and just give you feedback on it and tell you how to improve. And it can be, at first, it's just brutal, even if they're super nice about it.
Yeah.
When you first write a song, you're like, wow, this is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. And then a year later, you're going to be like, what was I ever thinking? But that's just art in general.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are good communities everywhere. But yeah, I used Reddit and now use Twitter a lot of the time too.
Reddit and Twitter. Nightflyer, we're getting towards the end of this interview. I'd like to first of all, thank you for coming on. Totally appreciate it. It's been
my pleasure.
Such a cool talk. Let's. I have one question here that I'm staring at on my notes that I need to ask. We've sort of been kind of going in this direction, but how do you capture the vibe? The vibe of synthwave, not any old vibe, but the vibe of nostalgia. What is it? There is a feeling to it, and I'm curious if, sure, you could just throw on a 707 and an arpeggiator or whatever, but when I'm listening to your tracks, there is that I don't know, that deep nostalgia, if that's going to be a new category at HMV now, like deep nostalgia, where it's, how do you channel that feeling? Like, because if I would say that the person that is starting to make synthwave, I would say the biggest hurdle isn't so much the production, so much as it's actually trying to get the calls to nostalgia in the sound. How do you get to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think music theory has function there, but theory doesn't really play a huge part in the music I make, apart from knowing basic scales and how chord progressions work. And it's really just a lot of experimentation and being like, oh, this chord sounds like pretty melancholic, and oh my god, this one sounds really melancholic, so I'm just going to put the two together. Yeah, it's not really a science for me. It's more just a lot of experimentation, which ironically is part of science, and just kind of going with my gut. And I think being inspired is a really important aspect. So I might hear, like I said, I was a big fan of Boards of Canada, and they're notorious for having a very cassette-y tape sound that's really involves a lot of pitch drifting and warbling, and it's just a lot of samples that are just processed by a lot of analog equipment. And I don't know, it's just I just want to capture a feeling I feel, which is funny because I'm not like a sad person or anything. I don't think you have to be to make this music, but I think it's just I have loved that kind of feeling for years and years, and I just really wanted to capture it. And I feel like I'm just working towards that goal with every song I make. If that makes sense.
Yeah, something I've talked about before on the podcast. I accidentally bought the Yamaha A3000 off Kijiji for that's like Craigslist for Americans that are listening, for like $70. And I played around with it, and I was like, wow, this really sounds like Boards of Canada. And then I later found out that's the sampler that they were using playing live. And so that warbly sound effect, it's actually, there's a lot of really cheesy, like vinyl scratch. And there's the one that I found sounded most like them was the phaser and the rotary vibrato.
Right.
Yeah, so that's what they were using for the geeks out there. Nightflyer, totally appreciate it. Can you talk about any new releases that are coming up or anything you want to plug?
Yeah, I have a new, I guess you could call it more like a deep house retro chillwave song coming out, kind of in the vein of Night Watcher 2, which I released last month. It's probably going to be called In My Heart. I'm hoping it'll be coming out next month. And then I have probably another chillwave song coming out after that, and then another deep housey melodic house track after that. But tomorrow is when the Fixed Neon compilation that I was part of will be officially released. It's called Gravity. It'll be out on Spotify and Bandcamp tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that.
Excellent. Yeah, and we could add any links that you want us to add in the show notes. Where can we reach you on your socials?
Sorry?
Your socials. What are your addresses to, like your social media accounts?
Oh, yeah. So on Twitter, I am Nightflyer. I think it's __. It's not the greatest Twitter handle. I kind of regret making it. And yeah, that's pretty much the only one I use. You can find me on Spotify and Bandcamp as Nightflyer. I have a Instagram, but I don't really maintain it that much. And that's about it.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Cool.
My pleasure.
All right. I'll end this now, and then I'll say goodbye. Bye, everybody.
Right.
This program was brought to you by the superwill64.com Entertainment Network. For more great shows, podcasts, and music, please visit superwill64.com.